Time is short, I would say. Time is short.
Yes,
Very,
time is
very
short.
I mean, take it all in, just do good with what you got, so.
Yeah.
I feel like this is the third time we've heard the story of David and his kingship, you know, and all that. But I don't care how many times you hear it, you always think, well, I didn't know that, or
Yeah.
I didn't realize that, or something, so. It's still good.
Yes. Every time you read through the Bible, you're going to get something new out of it.
It's true.
I need to stop that.
Any particular story, any song? There was one that just really jumped out at me when I was reading it, and I thought, I need to remember this number. And I was, it wasn't while I was reading it, I guess it was while I was listening, but I didn't have something to write it down. I can't remember. I guess I should have just gone back and reread all of them leading up to this, so I know, but maybe I'll remember to do that before next time.
Well, you do realize a lot of those songs we sing.
Yes.
You know, that's what gets me, and then my head, while I'm listening, goes on to the song, and I'm like, whoa, I just.
Yes. And there were quite a few of them this
Yeah,
week.
there was. One that jumped out to me was that bless the Lord, oh my soul, and all that is within me. I thought, gosh, how many times have we sung that? You know,
Yes.
it's so important.
Anything else? Anyone else?
I did learn more. So,
Okay, somebody tell me the story of David bringing the ark into Jerusalem. Both times that he did that, tried to do that. What happened?
The
Put it on
first time you
heart.
tried?
He wasn't supposed to.
First time he put it on a cart, he wasn't supposed to. And what happened?
And Uzzah
Uzzah?
tried to steady it, and God killed
Yeah.
him.
God killed him for touching the ark. How many of you thought that was kind of harsh?
I did.
I think we all did.
He was trying to help.
Okay? Yes, he was. But there's some things that I read this week about that just really kind of stood out to me. First of all, and foremost, God told them, do not touch the ark.
Did.
Okay? Secondly, and this is something I hadn't really thought of, it said that the oxen stumbled, right? It doesn't say anything about the ark about to fall off or anything else. It just said the oxen stumbled and he reached up. So it could have been the ark was fine anyway. But he reached out his hand and touched the ark, which he wasn't supposed to do. That it was I wonder if I have that verse. Yes, here it is. In Numbers chapter 4, verse 15, it says, after Aaron and his sons had finished covering the holy furnishings and all the holy articles, and when the camp was ready to move, the Kohathites, not just the Levites, but a small branch of them called the Kohathites, are to come and do the carrying, but they must not touch the holy things or they will die. Very specifically. And the Kohathites are to carry those things that are in the tent of meeting. They had, the Levites were divided up into three groups. And one group was to take care of like the outer stuff, the poles and the curtains, like the fence area around everything. Another group was to come in and take care of the actual tabernacle, the tent. But the Kohathites were to go in and get the Ark of the Covenant, cover it up, carry out the table of showbread, the altar of incense, the brazen altar, all of those things they were to carry out and carry. Every one of those utensils or those items. And then the others had carts to carry the tents and the poles and all of that stuff. But this is the thing that kind of stood out to me that I hadn't thought of. The ark had stayed in Abinadab's house for like 3 months. No, this was before that, for a long time. Don't know exactly how long, but it was a long time. And Uzzah was the son of Abinadab. He was there all of the time. And the ark was there. And the writer of this said that he thought maybe Uzzah got a little too familiar. I mean, the ark was there. He saw it all the time. They were being blessed. And maybe he lost a little bit of the reverence for God. Do we ever do that?
Take it for granted.
Yeah, I think we do a lot. We have this concept sometimes of God and what we think God is like, and we focus on His mercy and His love, and He is all of that, but He is also a holy God. And we need to treat Him as such. And the children of Israel, especially the ones that came right out of captivity, out of slavery, they got to witness a lot of miracles, and they had a healthy respect for God. And sometimes I think we take God for granted. We don't show Him the respect that He deserves. We kind of become too familiar with Him. There's a saying that says, familiarity breeds contempt, right? And I think that may have been what happened here. How many times have you heard somebody, and I'm going to tell you who, but I've heard people in our church say this. Well, the man upstairs did this or said this or whatever. That's being too familiar and not showing God the proper respect that He is due, okay? And if you've ever used that phrase, don't do it anymore, okay? No. Number one and foremost, God is not a man. In fact, he has that in the Bible. It says, God is not a man that He should lie, or a son of man that He should change his mind. Exact quote, right? He's not man. He is God. And we need to treat Him with the respect that He deserves. And too many times I think we've just gotten so familiar and, kind of got to the point where we don't really respect Him, don't show that fear. Now, all through the Bible it talks about fearing God, and it's not fear that paralyzes you, but fear that shows a healthy respect, knowing who He is and what He is able to do, okay? I have a healthy respect for heights, similar to that. Of course, I would probably say I'm afraid of heights too, but you need to have a healthy respect for God and show that respect and not treat Him as if He's common, because He's not. Okay. In fact, this guy that wrote this little article said that may have been why Moses lost the opportunity to go into the promised land, because he had become too familiar with God and didn't treat God with proper respect. God said, speak to this rock, and Moses decided he'd do it his way, and he struck the rock, which he did before. And it is interesting that God went ahead and gave him water anyway, even when he wasn't obedient. But we need to listen, and we need to be obedient to everything God tells us. And remember that He is holy. And we need to treat Him that way. Anything else? Any comments about that? What do y'all think?
Well, I think some people treat God like He's their buddy.
Yes.
He is your best friend,
Right.
but He is not your buddy.
Right. Yep. And some of them treat Him like grandpa or, you know, Santa or things like that. Oh, just want to get what they can from him.
Sometimes I think we'd like to help him along, like the ark was falling and the guy
Yeah,
touched it, he thought he was, well, he didn't think.
Probably didn't
The
think.
natural reaction, of, let me save this from it getting hurt or damaged or, you know, I put myself in the guy's place.
yeah,
I'd be dead too probably, but
yeah. I
nevertheless.
think a lot of us would probably, if we were there and that started happening, we'd probably just react in the same way. But again, it doesn't, yeah, that was one of the things I told you he wrote in his articles. It doesn't say that the ark started to slip or anything else, just that the oxen stumbled. There's probably a little bit of a jerk and instinctively, I guess.
Natural reaction.
But yes,
Not only, well, I think I heard it explained that it was not only like a lack of faith, the guy thought it would fall and he lost faith for a second.
Right.
Trying to catch it, but it was kind of like one of those things where his intentions were good, but that is not what he was told to do.
right,
So even though it was needed to be protected, that was not his job. God was
Right.
calling him to do that. And sometimes with familiarity, we think we know better,
yeah,
and we put ourselves in that spot, and it's the right thing to do, but that's not what we were supposed to do.
right. Yeah, I hope y'all can hear all of that. I will probably mess it all up and say it wrong, but the fact that he thought he was doing the right thing, which I'm sure he did, but that was not his responsibility. God will take care of his ark, right? That was God's responsibility. He thought he knew, in a sense, thought he knew better than God. And we do that as well.
Do that too.
Yeah. Is that close?
Yes.
Okay. There's something else that you said that I thought, oh yeah, another point, but I can't remember what it was, so I'll think of it maybe.
That he lost faith for a minute or two.
Yes, lost faith, yeah. And we do that. But I like the, he thought he knew better than God. I mean, we don't like to think that, say, oh no, I would never think that I would know better. But we do act like that a lot. You know, even sometimes in our prayers, we'll say, God, I need this or I need that. That would be, in a sense, thinking we know better than what God does, because God knows what's best for us, right? And just because we want something or think we need something doesn't necessarily mean that that's the best thing for us. I've shared with you many times a book I read, and I can't remember the musician that wrote it, but it's called "This Is My Story and This Is My Song." And in the story, but he was talking about how he was his wife was in the hospital and she was not doing well at all. So he went down to the chapel there at the hospital, and he just poured out his heart, prayed over the situation, prayed over his wife, and just was distraught about everything. And he said it was just as if God stopped and said, listen, I will heal her if that's what you want. But if you allow her to go through this and allow you and her to go through this, you will experience me in a much, much great deeper way than you've ever imagined. And he was like, okay, God, you know what's best? Yeah. And he did. He said he got a much deeper understanding of who God is by allowing her and them to go through the situation. I don't remember any of the situation, but I do remember that point that he made. All right. Anything else? Well, I want to bring up another one we read this week, and that was Psalm 22. And there's a lot of discussion been in the last few years about this because, and I want you to know, I've never heard this until just the last few years. But Jesus, from the cross, he cried out, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Which is the first line of Psalm 22. And they didn't have psalm numbers or verse numbers or anything that way. And so I have heard this from multiple sources over the last few years that whenever, in New Testament times or even after that, when people would want to refer to a passage, they would, like, to a psalm, they would quote the first verse. And everybody, especially the Jewish people that had almost all of the Old Testament memorized, they would know exactly what that verse, or what the whole chapter said, and what the person was meaning when they mentioned that. That psalm is considered a messianic psalm. It's a psalm about the Messiah, and it's written by David. And there are some things in here. I'm going to read a few verses and think about the cross. Okay, David wrote this. David had no idea that Jesus was going to be crucified. Probably didn't even know what crucifixion was. Well, I doubt he knew what crucifixion was. That didn't really come into play. There was some before the Roman Empire, but the Roman Empire were the ones that used it extensively. And so he had no idea. He was probably experiencing some things in his own life, and he wrote this down and as a lament, things that he was going through. But you need to think about Jesus on the cross when you read this. I'm going to skip the first part of it, but in verse 7 it says, all who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. He trusts in the Lord. Quote, he trusts in the Lord, let the Lord rescue him. Let him deliver him since he delights in him. Does that sound familiar? Gospels say exactly the same thing. The people, they would mock him. They hurled insults at him. They even shook their heads at him. And it says that they said, don't do anything. Let's see if God will save you. If he raised others, let's see if God's going to take him off the cross too. Exactly those same words. Goes on in verse 14. It says, I'm poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart has turned to wax, it's melted away within me. All of the bones are out of joint. And that is exactly what happens when crucifixion. They didn't break any bones, and it says that a little bit later. But it's like dislocating shoulders, different places in their body, they come out of joint. So it's a perfect description of the cross. It says, my strength is dried up like a potsherd. My tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. You lay me in the dust of death. Tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. I've talked to a lot of people. I've never experienced this, okay? But a lot of people who have had surgery or something along those lines, lost blood in some way, and the thirst is intense. And they can't talk, and especially when the doctor says you can't have anything to drink, you can eat some ice chips. Any of you experienced that?
Oh, yeah.
And I've heard over and over and over that ice chips don't do much good at all. You want something to drink. And as much blood as he lost there on the cross and the beatings and everything else that happened to him, that's going to happen. It says, dogs have surrounded me. A band of evil men has encircled me. They have pierced my hands and my feet. And I thought first about the evil men surrounding me. I thought about the thieves that were hung on the crosses on either side. One did ask for forgiveness, but they were definitely guilty. They were, in a sense, evil people. But his hands and his feet were pierced. What do you think David went through that he thought about this, that his hands and feet were pierced? You know? Again, I know it was the inspiration of the Holy Spirit that had to write all of this stuff, but it is just so specific. It's hard to believe that he didn't know exactly what was going to happen. Verse 17, I can count all of my bones, and people stared and gloated over me. Count all of my bones, because none of them were broken. That was also from Isaiah. And 18, it says, they divided my garments among them and cast lots for my clothing. You know,
Makes
it
me
just...
think he had a vision.
Huh?
Makes me think he might have had a vision.
He might have, right? And it just, it's so, it's, you know, it is prophetic. David was a prophet in speaking this. Isaiah has a lot of the same kind of things in his writings. But it's just, every time I think about this happening hundreds of years before Jesus was born, and David writes all of this stuff, and it's not the only prophecy, okay, in the Old Testament about crucifixion, but it is just so specific. It'd be hard to me. I don't know how anybody could not believe in the Bible and in God when he had this stuff written hundreds of years before it actually happened, and it was just so specific. Now, one of the things, and this is the kind of controversial thing, it says at the end of 24, he has not hidden his face from him, but has listened to his cry for help. Now, I know a lot of people, and this is the way I was brought up and taught, that God turned his back, that's why it became dark. And Habakkuk says that, Habakkuk is talking about God, and he says that your eyes, I guess I should read that instead of just trying to quote it. I do have it here someplace. Okay, it's not that one. Okay, Habakkuk 1:13 says, your eyes are too pure to look on evil, you cannot tolerate wrongdoing. And I heard a lot of different people on both sides of this, okay? It's hard for me to imagine that God completely rejected Jesus at that point because he's God.
10, that's it.
And so, how could that be? I think the thing there is the forsake. It's not saying that Jesus was rejected by God. I wonder myself if, when at that point Jesus, our sin was placed upon him, and maybe for the first time in his life, there was a little separation. Because that's basically what sin does. It separates us from God. And for the first time in his existence, I guess, not just life here on earth, but the first time that he and the Father were not closely connected because of our sin. And he accepted that. But God, I don't think could have turned his back completely on him because, number one, he was doing exactly what God wanted him to do, right? God was, God the Father, this was his plan all along. So how could he turn and completely, turn away or reject? And I understand the thought of God being pure and holy and can't look upon sin and things that way, but I think sometimes maybe we take it too far. I think there was something there, and maybe that's why Jesus cried out, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? But it also could be just him telling everybody around here, remember that song back there, Psalm 22, you don't have a number, but that starts out like that. That whole song is talking about me. And the people knew that was a messianic song, that it was talking about the Messiah. They didn't understand what the Messiah would do, but they understood that this was talking about the Messiah. So he's basically saying, yeah, you read that, remember that? That's talking about me. That's what I'm going through right now. And so anyway, What are your own thoughts about all of that?
Well, I think God can look on sin because we're sinful.
Yes, we are.
All of us are. And he reaches down into our very deepest depths and pulls us up.
Yes.
So the fact that he can't look on sin doesn't really wrangle with me because I feel like he has saved us all.
Yes. And Jesus
And
himself
continues to
said,
do so.
I have come to seek and to save that which was lost. How can he seek you if he can't see you?
Exactly.
Maybe it was because it was his, part of his own being, is why he couldn't look upon it.
Yeah. Maybe.
We really don't know.
No. One of those things, I think there's a lot of, I truly believe, there's lots and lots of things that we believe, that we read, that we teach, that we get to heaven and God's going to start going, I made that so clear. How could you mess that up? How could you? And he'll just kind of
Yeah.
shake his head at us. Yeah.
I was gonna say, go ahead, sir.
I've thought lots of times about my son, for an example. I could, okay, but I'm not God.
Right.
And if I knew that I could resurrect him immediately, I might have a different outlook
Might
on it,
have,
but
yeah.
I'm not God.
Right.
And the human part that Jesus was, he had to go through that for us too. It's,
And that was another thing that they brought out in several of the articles, is that Jesus is, or was, 100% human. He was human. And when bad things happen to you as a human, sometimes you think about that. God, why did you leave me? Why did I have to do this? Even though he knew he did, he knew he had to, he knew God was there, but sometimes it's just our, when things happen to us, a lot of times our emotions and stuff, it just comes out. And we don't really, maybe not really mean what we say or what we do, but it's just the immediate reaction to our emotions. Maybe that was part of it too. Yes.
Well, they say curiosity killed the cat,
Mhm.
but like you're saying, Jesus knows our whole story because he's written it out for us. So
Right.
we just go by what he says, right? Because he already knows what's going to be planned for you.
Yeah.
My grandma says the same thing.
Yeah. I know he knew everything, but I still think that human element was there, and
That's it. You mess up.
he didn't sin in doing it, but it's just like,
But it's human
why
nature. to mess
why is
up.
all this going on? In fact, he prayed. What did he pray in the garden? Well, before that, if it is possible,
Take this cup from
take this cup from me. I don't want to do this. I mean, that was his human nature coming in. I don't want to go through that kind of death. I'm sure he's seen evidence of it and knew all about it because, like I said, the Romans they used it a lot. And I don't remember exactly when it was, but I know at one point that they had like hundreds of people crucified along the road coming into and out of Jerusalem. Now that may have been after Jesus rose from the dead. I don't know, but it was something they did all the time. That was their, I guess, preferred form of capital punishment.
That's it. Everybody watch.
Yeah.
That's it.
And because of that, it's like, yeah, I don't want to have to go through that.
That's it.
Well, maybe it was
I don't know if it's a stretch, but even Jesus cried, I think at Lazarus.
yes,
He cried, he knew where he was going, he knew he was gonna bring it back, but he
Right.
still cried. Could that have not been by God, maybe in that moment, God didn't really turn it back, but it hurt.
yes, could have been. Yep, that's a good
It's to the
example.
Son.
Because Jesus wept. I mean, it's not that he shed a tear. It's not that he cried. I mean, he wept. It's a very powerful thing. And he was in deep sorrow at the grave of Lazarus, knowing what he was going to do. In fact, he told them before he got there, he said, look, Lazarus is dead, but it's not going to end in, I mean, he said he's sick, but it's not going to end in death. He knew he was going to raise him from the dead. But when he got there, that emotion just came out. And maybe that's what was kind of going on in the cross too, that the emotions just kind of got to him. And he just, like I said, there's both sides of that, about that verse and whether it, in Habakkuk, whether it really means that God turned his back on you. But I don't think he could have rejected him even if he turned his back.
Still got the jitters.
Anyway. Anything else?
Yeah. A little bit of a
All right.
burn on the-
Well, I got one more thing. No. I got one more thing, but we're not going to do that tonight. Y'all want to stand and join hands? We'll make as close to a circle oval as we can. We'll sing our dismissal chorus. By the way, I will not be here next week. I've got graduation at CB Tech. So Bob's going to do something. Don't know what.
Well, sir. Yes, sir.
I know that. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior.